Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. My name is Diana Barrero Zalles, and I am the Global Blockchain Business Council's Head of Research and Sustainability. It is a pleasure today to welcome you to GBBC's second of a series of GSMI roundtables, where we will focus on AI convergence with blockchain technology. We will give a brief overview of our AI convergence paper, which we should be linking shortly, the link to it in the chat, and then followed by an open discussion with our members today on the main topics of the paper. We really thank you all for joining. We really want to welcome all the working group members, the chair, the participants and the supporters into this open discussion. And the goal of today is really to define potential action items, topics in need of continued conversations to advance the role of AI in convergence with blockchain technology in responsible ways for initiatives across different industries. And today I am glad to be joined by Jenny Cieplak from Latham Watkins to discuss this paper that she so kindly chaired the working group for. So Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jenny Cieplak. I'm a partner at the Latham Watkins New York office. My practice concentrates on fintech, which includes a lot of crypto and blockchain, and has recently expanded to include a lot of artificial intelligence. These are the types of things that our clients are talking about. So I feel like this report is very timely, and I'm really grateful to GSMI for allowing me to chair the working group and to participate in all these discussions. And I look forward to continuing the conversation after this call.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Jenny, why don't you walk us through briefly what the report was about in a couple of minutes? And first, let's start with, can you discuss the working group's taxonomy and how the concepts of the taxonomy that you've put together fit together?
Sure. So we wanted to boil down to what we thought were some essential definitions for AI technology so that people could be talking with a common language. And one of the most important things that we did was we really wanted to distinguish between generative AI and predictive AI, not necessarily because it's important to use exactly those terms, but to clarify the concepts. Generative AI is producing new content based on a prompt, whether that's code, images, text, etc. And what we've called predictive AI is about analyzing information. Obviously, those concepts can sometimes bleed into each other, such as when you're analyzing data and creating a report based on that data. But we thought that those were different enough uses that we wanted to delineate them. And we also wanted to begin to grapple with some concepts about the data used in AI tools and to get at the different ways that data was used. The GSMI team came up with a really great visual that I think really highlights how AI tools are trained in the various types of data sets. And Diana, I don't know if you want to, if you can share that visual now and we can talk a little bit more about that.
I have the taxonomy here in one tab with some of the definitions and the main terms, and then the visual of how they, many of them fit together.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I thought that this was a really great visual because it talked about the different types of training data that can be used, whether that is really structured data or unstructured data. There's a big difference between those two. And a lot of times we actually do see people using models that are based on one or the other. And then the different types of learning, supervised, unsupervised, or reinforcement. So that's the gist of our initial taxonomy, and I think we're looking forward to working to further refine these and to come up with new defined terms so that we really can be speaking a common language about AI.
Yeah. Maybe you can scroll a little, I think the last part, it doesn't quite fit. I want to fit the title or all the way into deep learning, but yeah, that's fantastic. And that was a great exercise to put together something like this with the group. What can you say, Jenny, are the main use cases that were analyzed throughout the journey of putting together this document?
Sure. So, I mean, writing about AI is a huge topic, and we wanted to be somewhat focused. So generative AI is making a lot of headlines, like ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion. We wanted to focus on some practical uses that might be used or created by the GBBC members. And it's hard to talk about the policy implications and risk without thinking about what the AI is actually being used for. And so some of this was driven by the various expertise we had in the group. And I really wanted to thank, I don't know if they're on this call, but Alexander Brunner and Annie Newman for their contributions to the various use cases. My expertise is in fintech, and I have a great team at Latham who pitched in to write about use cases in the financial sector. But Alex and Annie, as well as the GSMI team, did a fantastic job describing use cases that are quite different from fintech. So like I said, we did talk about some financial sector use cases, AML, KYC, fraud detection and prevention, and decisions about creditworthiness, all of which I found really interesting. We also talked about autonomous vehicles, and lastly, about how AI can be used actually in government and policy making, as opposed to what policies we should have around AI, how AI can actually be used by governments in a way to drive efficiencies. And so I thought all of those were really interesting. And again, we wanted to just do a general paper to incorporate these use cases to talk about some of the general risks and rewards for using AI. So that's why we came up with this framework. And I think next we wanted to talk about blockchain and distributed computing. So
Right.
Diana,
Yeah.
okay.
Because it's all about like the convergence with blockchain, and we've framed the role of blockchain. We've really explored the role of blockchain from the standpoint of data integrity and data transparency as an accounting and audit to provide reliability to the data going into AI tools. So really this initial report talked about some of the use cases for AI tools, also the risks associated with those uses. And Jenny, please expand on how do you think blockchain and distributed computing might mitigate some of the risks through the very features of blockchain technology, especially with adding trust.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, one of the risks that gets discussed a lot with AI tools is the fact that it's really difficult to get enough training data and compute power to really create a good model. One of the things that we mentioned in the report is that there's a few large providers that really have a great deal of data access and a great deal of compute power. And so it becomes more difficult for new entrants to come into this market. Federated learning is something that we're hearing about a lot more, and something that we'd like to think about concentrating on for another session of this working group. And the basic idea behind federated learning is that training is done through nodes on a distributed basis. So there's a distribution of computing power that allows for a more democratized way of building a model. But I think there's also a lot of points to discuss around how that data is actually tracked, what standards are used for doing that training, and standards are something that we're going to get into and talk a little bit more about as we go on through the agenda for this call. But so that's one thing that we've been thinking about. We're also hearing a lot about putting trading data on a blockchain, just so that there is a permanent record of that training data. I'm not sure that it's hugely practical, but one way that I do think recording things on blockchain can really help is with authenticating identity and content. we've been hearing a lot about deep fakes, etc. And it's possible that we could have a blockchain solution that allows digital artists to record images that they create, for example. There's definitely a lot to think about there as well. For example, just whether it's even possible to truly authenticate something as not being AI generated. But I definitely think that's something that deserves more explanation or exploration.
Something we can go toward earlier in the paper here, we've aligned very specific blockchain convergence and opportunities. It's exactly what you're mentioning, blockchain providing visibility in terms of the provenance of data into algorithms, blockchain providing transparency and on the data provenance. The transparency, we've talked about the transparency on AI outcomes, and Jenny, please jump in. The uses of AI outcomes and the outcomes themselves, and being able to see how they are the impact that they have. And there was an example in the healthcare space, right? If there is an AI algorithm that can help a doctor identify the imaging of patients and identify if a tumor does indeed show cancer, for example, that yes, no decision could come from an AI tool. The outcome of that decision can also be recorded on a blockchain securely and help us identify the effectiveness of these very tools, or also if there's any bias or any glitches in terms of the decision-making logic, because the data is recorded. Also, the concept of data privacy and security, which is sometimes a concern for AI, the blockchain functionalities that can actually safeguard that, and the decentralization. There's big concern sometimes in AI with respect to concentrations of power and manipulation when too much information is in the hands of a few entities, and the ability to develop algorithms to manipulate behaviors. If we leverage decentralization, that can actually bring the power back to the individuals in many ways, and that's related to the processes that can preserve equality in many ways. But that being said, it's a quick summary, and we'll maybe we can conclude this quick introduction, unless you want to add anything, Jenny, but we can open it up for discussion otherwise.
Sure. I mean, I think in summary, what I'd say is I think there's a lot more to be explored here in talking about how AI and blockchain converge. And one thing that we didn't really touch on yet was ways that AI can mitigate some of the risks associated with blockchain and crypto, like using AI tools for transaction monitoring, which can lead to more accurate determinations. We're already hearing that there are fewer false positives associated with AI tools than with manual review. And of course, it's much more efficient. But at the same time, you have to be sure that you're not continuing to perpetuate biases by using those tools. So there's definitely a lot more to explore here.
Yes. So thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing these main insights from the paper, for your valuable work as co-chair of the GSMI Working Group. And also thank you to all the working group members, supporters, feedback providers for all of their contributions. We will now end this recording and start an open discussion with the Roundtable's participants here on next steps